Israel and Hezbollah attacks are continuing despite international pressure for a ceasefire. In a new development, the Syrian Defense Ministry said in a statement that 5 soldiers were killed and a 6th injured following a strike carried out by Israel. The statement adds that the attack, which took place in the early hours of today, was targeted at one of their military sites on the Syrian-Lebanese border in the Damascus countryside. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials gave it an updated death toll, saying more than 25 people have been killed in today's strike alone and over 700 people killed in Israeli strikes since Monday. It also adds that more than 27,000 people have fled Lebanon since fighting began, and more than 70,000 internally displaced people have taken refuge in some 500 shelters set up across the country. Well, the tit-for-tat continues as Hezbollah is also showing it's not willing to back down and continues to fire rockets at Israel. The Hezbollah group says it attacked the areas of Tiberias and Haifa in northern Israel. This was confirmed by the Israeli Defense Forces, which noted that 10 projectiles were identified crossing from Lebanon following sirens in the Haifa area. The military said some of the projectiles were intercepted and others were identified as having fallen in open areas. It was only yesterday Hezbollah confirmed the killing of the head of its drone unit, Mohammed Surur, after the Israel military gave details of his death. The IDF said Surur was killed after Air Force fighter jets carried out a strike on the Lebanon capital, Beirut. The IDF has now announced the killings of even more senior Hezbollah figures. The military indicated they killed the head of Hezbollah's missiles and rocket force, Ibrahim Mohammed Kabisi, as well as his deputy in an operation called Northern Arrows. In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given the green light, allowing his team to continue ceasefire negotiations with the United States over the situation in Lebanon. His change in posture comes rather surprising, despite his insistence that the Israeli Defense Forces continue their operations against Hezbollah with full force. A statement by the Prime Minister partly reads, quote, "Israel shares the aims of the US-led initiative of enabling people along our northern border to return safely and securely to their homes," end quote. The statement adds both teams met on Thursday and says discussions will be continued in the coming days. A U.S. official said that Mr. Netanyahu originally gave his assent to a truce, but then changed his mind in the face of opposition from some in his government. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the United Nations General Assembly as tensions in the Middle East continue to flare. According to reports, some leaders walked out as he took to the stage in protest to the situation in Lebanon and Gaza. Mr. Netanyahu describes the events of October the 7th as reminiscent of the Nazi Holocaust. He also noted he didn't intend to come to this year's General Assembly, but his reason for coming is to set the record straight that Israel seeks nothing but peace. He also sounded a warning to Hamas, saying he will not rest until all the hostages in Gaza are returned back home. Now, the Prime Minister also deployed a map analogy to show what he called the blessing and curse of the Middle East.
This is the map I presented here last year. It's a map of a blessing. It shows Israel and its Arab partners forming a land bridge connecting Asia and Europe between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Across this bridge, we will lay rail lines, energy pipelines, fiber optic cables, and this will serve the betterment of 2 billion people. Now look at this second map. It's a map. Look at the second map. It's a map of a curse. It's a map of an arc of terror that Iran has created and imposed from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Iran's malignant arc has shut down international waterways. It cuts off trade. It destroys millions, destroys nations from within, and inflicts misery on millions. On the one hand, a bright blessing, a future of hope. On the other hand, a dark future of despair. And if you think this dark map is only a curse for Israel, if you think that, then you should think again.
And earlier, before the Prime Minister's anticipated speech, many staged demonstrations in New York City. The pro-Palestinian protesters said the Prime Minister shouldn't even be giving any speeches at the UN, calling for his arrest.
This solution is no longer there. It's not going to happen. I'm a Palestinian. I live in the 48, my hometown on the 48 land. My land is the other side and my town is this side. So to me, to say solution is no valid no longer.
There's a genocide happening in Palestine. I'm an Indigenous woman from Australia, and so we're here to call for justice for Palestine. He's a war criminal and he should be jailed. That's what we think, right? He shouldn't be here giving speeches at the UN, like how dare they? What he's just been doing in Lebanon as well. Like, so I think it's just a movement of people to come out and hold the governments accountable. It's not just Netanyahu, it's world leaders that are condoning this behavior as well.
He's executing state-sponsored terrorism. The fact that he was allowed to land in this city and he is staying at a hotel and he is not arrested is a shame on everyone in power in the United States and in this city.
And Qatar, which has always been at the forefront of negotiations in Gaza, is also weighing in on the ceasefire talks in Lebanon. Its foreign ministry spokesperson, Majid al-Ansari, noted the country is working with partners to ensure fighting stops there. He also says Qatar will continue to play its role as a mediator to ensure peace in the Middle East.
We are working with our partners to make sure that there is an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon and that we work our way back from the current escalation. Obviously, on the other track, the talks about Gaza, we continue with our efforts. His Highness made it very clear in the UN that in the face of all pushback, in the face of all the negative attitude towards Qatar's role as a mediator, we will continue as long as there is a process to continue through. I am not aware of a direct link, but obviously both mediations are hugely overlapping when we are talking about the same parties for the most part that are taking place in that are taking part in this. But I'm not aware of any direct correlation right now in the talk.
Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has joined other Western allies to call on Israel and the Lebanese-Hezbollah militant group to agree to a 21-day ceasefire in her address before the United Nations General Assembly. DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu joins us with more. Chiponda, so what did the German Foreign Minister say?
Well, the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock warned of the harm an escalation would have to peace and security. And she said that the lack of progress is sometimes frustrating and painful. Now, in Germany, there is also concern about the wider implication of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, which is also considered a terrorist organization by the EU and the US. Now, Lebanon is also home to 1.5 million Syrian refugees, so there is concern about what a wider conflict would mean for them.
All right, and what about the EU, the European Union? How has Brussels reacted in all of this?
Well, on Thursday, the EU released a joint statement calling for a 21-day cross-border ceasefire. It did that together with the US, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the UK, and a few other countries. And earlier in the week, the European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief, Josep Borrell, demonstrated frustration about the conflict when he called for a de-escalation in Lebanon. Now, Borrell said that, quote, civilians in Lebanon are paying an intolerable, unacceptable price, end quote. Borrell's frustration was about a long-standing UN resolution designed to end hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah. However, despite the joint statement that the EU released together with the other countries on Thursday calling for a ceasefire, European officials are probably not expecting to have much of an impact on influencing a de-escalation of the ongoing attacks between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Indeed, interesting times. But finally, Chaponda, how much sway does the EU have with Israel?
Well, the fact is that the EU is constrained when it comes to taking any action because it would need all of its 27 EU member states to agree. And they remain too divided when it comes to any decisions on the Middle East. Germany is one of the countries calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, but it's its former colonial power, France, which could play a bigger role. Thousands of Lebanese citizens also have French nationality, and hundreds of French troops are involved in a UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon. So the French may very well play a bigger role in brokering a cessation of hostilities than other EU countries because of their historic and ongoing ties to Lebanon.
DW correspondent Chimbonda Chimbelu, thanks for the update once again. Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is warning of the risk of a full-blown war between Israel and Lebanon, indicating diplomatic solution is still the right way to go. This was relayed during the gathering of defense ministers of Australia, United Kingdom and the United States at a joint press conference in London. Britain's Defense Minister John Healey also noted the UK has deployed 700 British troops to Cyprus to help its nationals evacuate from Lebanon.
And we now face the risk of an all-out war. Another full-scale war could be devastating for both Israel and Lebanon. So let me be clear. Israel and Lebanon can choose a different path. Despite the sharp escalation in recent days, a diplomatic solution is still viable. And make no mistake, the United States remains postured to protect our forces and our personnel across the Middle East. And no one should try to exploit this crisis or expand this conflict.
If we see rapid developments in Lebanon, then Britain, with allies, is ready to respond. And in the last 24 hours, we've flown 700 UK military personnel to Cyprus. They stand ready to act should they be needed at short notice.
More reactions now, this time from a senior lecturer at the School of Security Studies in King College, London, Dr. Andreas Krieg, who says Israel has a clear objective in Lebanon. However, he says an operation at large cost would be the very best to potentially achieve a military objective in Lebanon, as Hezbollah will not be unseated or destroyed in their own country.
We're in a very dramatic situation here. The Israelis clearly don't prefer to do a ground invasion in Lebanon, but they have clearly set an objective of wanting to have their nationals returning back to their homes in northern Israel. So that is a clear objective. That objective will not be achieved if the status quo remains. So the status quo as it is now is, for the Israelis at least, not sustainable. So what they're trying to do is to make the situation for Hezbollah unsustainable as well. So up until a couple of weeks ago, Hezbollah would be able to indefinitely sustain the attacks by Israel on its infrastructure. I think if the idea for the IDF is to then just grab territory and holding it in southern Lebanon, moving or pushing Hezbollah physically up to the Litani River, this is at least something that Israel might be temporarily be able to achieve, but it's a situation that the IDF will not be able to maintain for long, so we'll have to eventually withdraw again, and then obviously Hezbollah can move back in. So it's an operation at large cost that at very best would probably achieve operational objectives, military objectives, but will be far from achieving any strategic objectives because Hezbollah will not be unseated in Lebanon and Hezbollah will not be destroyed.
As part of a humanitarian operation to the people of Lebanon, Beirut's non-profit soup kitchen Nation Station is catering for thousands of displaced people who fled their homes amid Israeli airstrikes. The soup kitchen was originally set up following the August 4th Beirut port blast in the year 2020. The voluntary organization, located in the Gaitawi neighborhood, has increased its meals to 700 per day as an emergency response since Tuesday, distributing them to different schools used as shelters. The organization hopes to increase the number of meals per day as more help is offered.